Coming up, an all-time great night for a freshman quarterback puts Alabama back on top of the college football world. We'll talk about it all next, right here on SEC Country Live. You know what? I'm not even going to pretend. This is a totally horrible, miserable day for me. Hey guys, I'm Brandon Adams. This is the reigning national champion once again, Mike Johnson, the former Alabama All-American. We are going to have some fun here today on AT&T SEC Country Live on the program here today. But, you know, I mean, it is what it is. Alabama wins, Georgia loses, and I'm left to sort of wallow in, as a lot of our commenters like to say from time to time, the pit of misery. I'm left to sort of be there.
Well, I'll tell you what, it was an all-time great one, and I'd be lying to you if I tried to sit here and tell you, it's exactly how we planned it. Bama shows up, takes care of business, dominates, and it just wasn't the case. It was out of the norm, I think, in a lot of different ways for the way you see Alabama win a football game. One of the gutsiest, obviously, coaching calls of all time in national title games. It was a crazy day.
Well, let me just dive in item number one here in our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. We're going to do a lot on Tua Tagovailoa, including something that Lane Kiffin had to say about him in a couple minutes that I thought was actually pretty strange, and I think probably paints Kiffin in a bit of a bad light. We'll do that coming up. But here's part of the frustration. Obviously, I've got my red and black on. I'm a Georgia fan. I wanted Georgia to win this game. But also, one of the big topics of our show for months and months has been, my belief that Tua Tagovailoa was just better than Jalen Hurts anyway.
Yeah.
And, there's nothing I'd love more than to sort of take the victory lap on this and say, yeah, see, I told you so. Tua's the better quarterback for Alabama. But I really can't even do that on a day like this because of the fact that he does it against Georgia, which makes it a little harder to stomach. But pretty clearly, and listen, Jalen Hurts is still a very capable football player. I'm not going to pile on him. But he was lacking something yesterday, something that was needed to win a national championship game. And when Alabama needed the extra spark, Tua was the guy that was able to provide that.
Yeah, he definitely was. And I think it's shocking, too, when you look at a guy like Alex Leatherwood, who I mentioned earlier today on Twitter, got a lot of traction with that. Just a true freshman at left tackle, true freshman at quarterback in the second half. And Tua it's hard to really put into words what exactly he did for that offense last night. It was like, he backed some of the playmakers off that were crowding the box, allowed the run game to open a little bit. He made incredible plays with his legs that time, being able to escape the pocket. And his arm talent. I mean, his arm talent was as evident as everybody knew it was leading into the game. The fact that you could just dial it up, though, and the head on his shoulders to be able to go into a second-half game and play and perform at the level he did. He played like he was 25 years old playing in college, and here he is 18 years old as a true freshman. I thought he deserved every ounce of praise that's going to come his way. I think that Nick Saban deserves every ounce of praise for putting him in the game.
So that is the one point I am going to dispute here somewhat, just a little bit. This idea that Nick Saban pushes the magic button that allows Alabama to win this game. For me, it's a slightly different narrative than that. Most programs are not the kind of program where the backup quarterback is actually better than the starter.
Right.
You got a starting quarterback that was good enough to get you the national championship game, but when he falters, you're able to bring in a quarterback that's even better than he is. This story is going to be painted as, Nick Saban, the courageous coach and sort of the winner of his career, he's going to make the bold move here. The truth is, most programs don't have enough talent to do that. And this is an important topic for me because the reason why Alabama won last night, the reason why it's won so many national championships is because the collection of talent amassed there in Tuscaloosa. That, for me, is the real story. It's freshman running back Najee Harris. It's freshman wide receiver Devontae Smith. You can mention Henry Ruggs. You can mention Jerry Jeudy. You certainly talk about Tua Tagovailoa. It's that collection of talent. A lot of those guys, 2017 kids from that recruiting class who played last night, that, for me, is more the issue. It's not the wizardry of Nick Saban as a coach. It's the roll up your sleeves and the elbow grease of let me win battles in the recruiting trail because even with Georgia recruiting the way it's recruited, last night the Alabama team was still just a little bit more talented.
Well, and I got to disagree with you. I think, listen, we just have never seen a storyline like that. In a national title game, and it's not the fact that he puts in a backup quarterback, the fact that the guy is a true freshman. I mean, 18 years old, and you wait all the way until the national title game to give this guy meaningful snaps. I thought only a guy who has the backing like Nick Saban does, only a coach who already has a national championship in his back pocket, in my opinion, could have made a call like that. Because if it goes badly, you don't have to answer to your fans that want to put your head on a spike and kind of take you to your grave. Nick Saban knew he had the backing and knew he had the credibility as Alabama's head coach to make a move like that. I don't think I've ever seen a move like that in any kind of sporting league, any kind of sporting event in a national championship game. I definitely didn't think that Alabama would be the place that it happened. So Tua is as incredibly talented as he is, and all the 5-star players in his back pocket for Nick Saban, he still had to pull that trigger, and I don't think I've ever seen a coaching decision like that.
So kind of an unusual sort of storyline kind of comes in off of this. Lane Kiffin's on the Dan Patrick Show saying something somewhat surprising that had Alabama coach Nick Saban not put Tua Tagovailoa in the game last night, that may have been Tua's last game in an Alabama uniform. Here is Lane Kiffin on with Dan Patrick this morning, and listen to what Kiffin says here and see if you can believe this.
The funny thing is, if this second half doesn't flip like this, and Alabama's moving the ball doesn't change it, people that really know what's going on will tell you that Tua was leaving, because Tua felt that he should have been the starting quarterback and had outperformed him in practice, and coach never gave him an opportunity. So has this second half not happened, it changes college football, because Tua is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in college football. I mean, he plays just like Steve Young. He's unbelievable talent, unbelievable release, and can get out of trouble, as you saw.
I mean, you buying what Lane Kiffin says here, that Tua Tagovailoa is transferring? And how bad does it make Lane Kiffin look that he wants to insert himself into this story here? And I don't know how much national coverage what Kiffin says here is going to get, but he's kind of back here as a connection to the story when this really ought to belong, the day ought to belong to Tua. It ought to belong to Nick Saban in Alabama. Frankly, it ought to partially belong to Brian Dable, the current Crimson Tide offensive coordinator. Lane Kiffin tries to find a way to steal some of these headlines. I mean, what do you, and I'm a bit of a fan of Kiffin.
Yeah, right.
Some of his antics, certainly his play calling, but I don't like this from Kiffin, though.
Yeah, I'm trying to find in the comment section. Somebody just wrote on here that it's like an ex-girlfriend. It just won't go away.
Yeah.
It's like it's a turd you can't flush right now, Lane Kiffin, for as part of this Alabama program. He keeps coming back up, and I don't buy that for a minute. I think that what Nick Saban has probably been telling Tua all year is that, you're going to have your opportunity in spring to compete for the starting quarterback job. Right now, throughout the season, you had a quarterback that had won a ton of games and a guy who had done a lot of good things in Jalen Hurts. So I don't think for one second that Tua would have transferred. I think that Nick Saban would have probably gotten in his ear and said, you know what, you're going to get a crack at this thing, I promise.
Wendy Stanley Calvert says, I had respect for Lane Kiffin, but he's just, actually, let me scroll down and get the rest of this. She says, I had respect for Lane Kiffin, but now he's just trying to cause an uproar. And Wendy, if you think that quote causes an uproar, listen to this clarification from Dan Patrick, who asked him, so wait, you're saying that Tua Tagovailoa was going to leave? Kiffin answers and then takes the conversation into a direction about Jalen Hurts. And for me, this is where the real problem begins. Here's Lane Kiffin again with Dan Patrick.
What you're saying, though, Lane, is if he didn't get in this game, you think that Tua is transferring from Alabama?
No doubt. He's played some, so he's going to have to sit. So he's going to go sit, and then he's going to have three. It'll be a 4 for 3. So sit for a year and have 3 years to play. He's not going to sit there for another year behind Jalen. When he feels like he didn't get an opportunity to beat him out. So now the story's going to flip the other way, and the story's going to be, is Jalen going to leave? Now, Jalen's such a great competitor. He may not, but most guys would. Most people would leave in this situation, and so that'll be interesting to see, and the thing is, you're so late. You're on January 9th here. Schools start, we started yesterday, so a lot of schools start for their spring semester already, so it'll be a decision he'll have to make pretty quick.
I mean, your boy is stirring up trouble right there. I mean, this is almost like de facto tampering. Now, I don't think he's trying to get Jalen Hurts to come to FAU, but Kiffin's well aware of when his classes have already started, the fact that a lot of spring semesters are starting. And listen, we're not naive here. Is Jalen Hurts thinking about all of his options right now? He probably is. But you still don't have to have his former offensive coordinator go on a national radio show and is a de facto national TV show and talk about, hey, I bet Jalen Hurts is thinking about transferring. Yeah. I mean, listen, I like Kiffin. I find him entertaining. I think he's a terrific play caller. I think he's miles better as a play caller than Brian Dable is. But this is not a good look for Lane Kiffin. I think this is dirty pool by Kiffin.
I'm telling you right now, and what's funny to me about it is listening to Lane Kiffin talk as if he's like buddies with Tua Tagovailoa. I mean, obviously they crossed paths on the recruiting trail, but at no point was Lane Kiffin there with Tua. It's not like he had Tua in his quarterback room, became buddies with him, and knows the ins and the outs, everything going on there. And he's like, if you talk to everybody in the know around the program. Lane, I don't know how many people you're talking to back in Tuscaloosa. I really don't. I mean, what is this guy talking about? It drives me crazy. And you're right. On a day when all the credit should be going to a guy like Tua, and you got to give Jalen Hurts, by the way, a ton of credit for how he handled the entire night last night. ESPN shoves a camera right in Jalen's face as the game's ending, just trying to get some raw emotion out of him. I thought it was a bad look by them, and I think it's a terrible look by Lane Kiffin today.
Well, I do think that Jalen Hurts, though, handled. I mean, y'all know I'm not a fan of Hurts' game, but I have no problem with Hurts as a person. I thought he handled himself with a lot of dignity and class. That is not a good spot to be in. If I got benched on this show in favor of somebody else, you better believe I'd be crying in the corner over there. But Jalen Hurts didn't do any of that. Yeah. He really earned a measure of respect from me. I can't change my opinion about his game. I think he's got some flaws. That's a pretty good dude, though.
Yeah, no, it really was, and I thought it was important to see a guy. And how many times this year, and there's been quarterback situations all around the SEC throughout the entire season. I think it was in game one in that very stadium when we were talking about the Tennessee quarterback situation and about how Jared Garantano didn't look really plugged in what was going on. Jalen was right there. I mean, he's around the huddle. He's hyping Tua up. He said afterwards, I cannot tell you how happy I am for this guy. He was built for moments like this. And so there was a completely huge line of classy words coming out of Jalen's mouth last night.
Elizabeth Bradford says Jalen Hurts isn't going anywhere. He's the one who got us here. We'll see how that plays out. Let's move on to item number 2 for now, though, here on SEC Country Live. On the Georgia side of things for a moment, it was obviously a bit of a dream season for Georgia. Not really picked to be in a game of this magnitude, but Dogs do win the SEC, win the Rose Bowl in thrilling fashion last week against Oklahoma, and came within an eyelash in overtime of winning the national championship here, which would have been the first since 1980. But for Kirby Smart, this is not about resting on laurels and looking back on these seniors and what they've accomplished at Georgia as sort of the end of the rainbow. Kirby Smart thinks Georgia's still got a lot more to come in the years ahead. In fact, he said as much post-game last night. Here's Georgia coach Kirby Smart.
You know, I can't say enough about the remarkable senior class. These 2 young men sitting next to me, they meant more to Georgia than yards. A lot of heart and soul, a lot of fire. Sonny Michel came over and talked to the group several times during the game, inspired those guys. But in overtime, we didn't finish when we had to, and Alabama did. And to give them credit, but I think everybody can see that Georgia's going to be a force to be reckoned with. I'm very proud of this team and this university, and we're not going anywhere.
So Kirby Smart there referencing the 2 guys sitting next to him. That was Sonny Michel and Nick Chubb, the 2 senior running backs who played their final game last night. But more importantly, he says Georgia's a force to be reckoned with and that Georgia's not going anywhere anytime soon. You agree with Kirby's assessment of his team?
I think it's an incredibly accurate assessment. And I think, listen, if you're a Georgia fan right now and you're trying to collect your thoughts on last night and try to figure out where this team is headed, look no further than what you saw across the ball in Alabama. And we mentioned, Henry Ruggs, we mentioned Devontae Smith, Tua Tagovailoa, Najee Harris, Alex Leatherwood. All these guys are 5-star signees from last year's signing class. These are all true freshmen that were on the field for a lot of these meaningful snaps. That's exactly what you're getting in this year's signing class if you're Georgia. You look at a guy like Jamari Sawyer. You look at a guy like Justin Fields, like a Cade Mays. All the guys that they've added in this signing class, Georgia's not going anywhere for some time. And you can say, Kirby's got the blueprint. I think that's factual. But the way he got his team to play emotionally, the way he's developed people, specifically in the trenches in the front 7, offensive and defensive line, I'm with him. I think that they're going to be a force to be reckoned with on the east side of this league for a long time.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I love doing, we were joking about this before the show, this is the day a lot of those way too early top 25 start coming out. A lot of, national championship futures odds come out from Las Vegas. I love preseason predictions. I like starting them as early as the end of the previous season. I'm really into that kind of thing. When I look ahead, and we're going to do a lot of this kind of talk this week, when I look ahead of the 2018 season in the SEC, I'm having a hard time finding those kind of contrarian opinions, those teams that you don't expect to be really good, who I think have a chance to be better than the expectations. Right now, this league does not look to have a lot of parity. I don't really see a serious contender to Georgia in the SEC East. Frankly, I'm not quite so sure how many teams in the SEC West right now are capable of competing with Alabama. I don't see a lot of that. But we're talking about Georgia, so I'll keep that theme alive here for a moment. When Kirby says they're not going anywhere, when they're a force to be reckoned with, I think that Georgia's path to Atlanta and the SEC championship is about as clear and removed from potholes as it possibly could be.
I think it's tough. It's tough too because you start looking at schedules, you start breaking down who's going to play where, you start looking at quarterback situations at Tennessee and Florida specifically. I think South Carolina is a team that could jump up and surprise some people next year, maybe win some games and keep themselves in that category. Obviously, Auburn playing both Georgia and Alabama next year on the road it's going to be tough to kind of replicate what they were able to do this year in some of those situations with losing Kerryon Johnson, Ken Pedway. Auburn, to me, is always going to be that team right there in the third slot. Obviously, they make the trip out of the SEC West this year to the SEC championship game. But I'm with you. When you look at Georgia right now, the heights at which they played this year, when you look at Alabama, a team that could be led by an incredible offense next year, when you look at the players you had on the field last night, there's just not a lot of things that make you kind of swerve off of your opinion that these two teams, Georgia and Alabama, are going to match up a bunch in the near future.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I think this showdown's coming. And listen, a lot of Alabama fans are not going to like this, but it's a fact. The on-field game last night was won by Alabama, but take a look at what's going on in recruiting right now. I think there's a lot of folks out there that will tell you that the four-star linebacker Quay Walker may flip from Alabama to Georgia. There's 2 official visits scheduled with the 5-star cornerback Tyson Campbell. If he were to choose Georgia over Alabama, I think you'd be talking about some recruiting momentum for Georgia that would keep some distance between itself and Alabama. Right now, Georgia's ranked as the higher-rated recruiting class. It's been a long time since Alabama hasn't been number 1 in the country or number 1 in the SEC. So depending on how this thing shakes out in February going towards National Signing Day, you could be in a scenario where Alabama may have won the game on the field, but the long-term health of the two programs may actually be leaning in the direction of Georgia a bit more, despite the fact that the Dogs took it on the chin last night.
I don't know that I'm willing to go that far yet, B. I mean, if I told you right now that Georgia's 2019 recruiting class would be number 6 in the country after the class they've had this year, I think all the Georgia fans would be okay with that.
Sure.
And I think that Alabama is slipping a little bit in recruiting. I think that Nick Saban, the early signing period, I think in a lot of ways, and you would never hear anybody admit this, but I think a lot of the kind of inner workings of the early signing period, Nick Saban wasn't that well prepared for. It just seems like he's trying to get a grasp of exactly how this early signing period deal is going to work. This is usually when Nick Saban would kick into gear, going in towards signing day. You just won a national title. You're calling recruits the night of the game. All of a sudden, you've got all these kids on campus the next couple of days. Some of the bigger recruits in the country have already signed on the dotted line, so you're not going to see a lot of that late surge that you would have in years past.
D. Pickett says we're talking about one recruiting class, but that's not necessarily the case for Georgia. 3rd overall in 2017. That's, if you care about the 24/7 Sports numbers, that was a plus 300 class for them. Ranked number 1 in 2018, ranked number 1 in 2019. Alabama won last night, I firmly believe, because of the talent that it's amassed over the course of several consecutive years of the number 1 overall recruiting class. If you let Georgia out-recruit you 2 years in a row in 2018, 2019, then I do think Georgia's in a better position to win these kinds of games going forward. And so when you talk about, Georgia not going anywhere, when you talk about, a force to be reckoned with, it's really in recruiting when that kind of stuff is earned, I believe, one way or another. Now, by the way, Alabama's no pushover here, and there's no guarantee that Alabama won't still rise up here and take a Tyson Campbell, hold on to a Quay Walker, and maybe swoop in and get somebody else. But Bama's lost more recruiting battles, not just to Georgia, too. They've lost a couple to Tennessee this go-around. Bama's lost more in recruiting in 2018 than we're used to seeing them lose, and you've got to win those if you want to maintain that spot at the top.
Yeah, I mean, it has taken them. It's really hit them on the chin the last couple of years, losing coordinators, having to change things in and out. Getting Brian Daboll, a guy who really has never recruited in his entire life, all of a sudden he has to step back into a recruiting role at Alabama. Pruitt obviously takes a couple of guys at Tennessee. But I still firmly believe that Alabama is going to finish strong in recruiting this year. Some of the names are flipping back and forth. We mentioned J.J. Peterson. You mentioned a guy like Quay Walker. We don't know what Jacob Copeland's going to do just yet. I think a lot of the ways that you look at this program, the development that Nick Saban has shown, I still believe that you're going to have a pretty strong class.
Our buddy Cliff Nelson, who's an LSU fan in the comments section, very gracious to Alabama fans thus far today. I've been noticing that. He says big things are coming from LSU. We're actually going to talk a little LSU later on in our program today here on SEC Country Live. For now, though, speaking of Tennessee, let's make them the subject of item number 3 on our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. And Jeremy Pruitt last night caught up with Mike Griffith, who covers the Vols for SECCountry.com. Mike obviously in Atlanta to get a look at his next head coach, or Tennessee's next head coach, and Jeremy Pruitt. And after the game, Pruitt kind of talked about some of the magic that Alabama may have employed to kind of pull this game from out of nowhere after being down 13-0 at the half. Here's what Pruitt said about his defense and the overall performance of Alabama.
Keep playing, good things will happen. That's what our guys do. They just kept trying to find a way, and they found a way at the end.
Thank you so much, Coach.
Not easy to hear necessarily what Pruitt says there, but he says, great teams find a way, and Alabama found a way to win. And we've talked a lot about Alabama. I think we would agree that's true. They did find a way last night. But in terms of sort of exporting that magic, outsourcing that from Tuscaloosa to Knoxville, can Jeremy Pruitt bring any of that with him to Tennessee?
I think he's definitely going to try. And he's a guy that I think a lot of Tennessee fans, specifically in the comment section, are really hoping that he can bring that magic. And Listen, I think Jeremy Pruitt, I think his rebuilding job is way bigger than Kirby Smart's was. I think that he has a lot of time ahead of him, that he understands that I have to lay the foundation and recruit first before I can even think about developing this team into some kind of SEC East powerhouse. But here's what you have a guy. He's a guy just like Kirby Smart who's been around Nick Saban for quite some time now, not in the same role that Kirby Smart was in, but he knows the inner workings of the program. I think he understands how to recruit. I think he's already started to dip into some of those recruiting beds, and I think he's going to do it his own way. I don't think this is going to look like Kirby Smart or like Nick Saban right now. I think Jeremy Pruitt's going to run his own ship. But when he starts developing, when he starts getting those players in the weight room like he knows they need to be, I think he's got the blueprint just as well as anybody else. I think it's going to be interesting to see it play out.
So here's my concern if I'm Tennessee. And by the way, I mean, I got to give credit where credit's due. I thought the J.J. Peterson thing was just all bluster. I know that not all of you follow recruiting as closely as I do, but Peterson's a big-time outside linebacker from down in southwest Georgia. This is a guy that's been a strong Alabama lean for a while. He called Tennessee his leader once Pruitt made the move over there. I thought this was much ado about nothing. He'd never even visited there, Knoxville. But sure enough, that relationship with Pruitt earned him J.J. Peterson. So Pruitt's going to make an impact on the recruiting trail. That's already been proven here. But I think there's a long way to go at Tennessee.
There is a long way.
I'm not sure about the offense. I think there's a lot of holes to be filled on defense. I think Pruitt's a sharp guy. He could be a real rising star in the coaching ranks. But we've already seen these first-year coaches. Kirby Smart just won 8 games last year at Georgia. I'm talking about back in 2016. Nick Saban, his first year in 2007. On and on you can go. You know, even really good coaches seem to have some trouble in their first year. I don't think Pruitt's immune to that. And I think it takes a little bit longer to even fill up this roster a little bit more. I believe that Butch Jones left a mess. So I think that Pruitt's a pretty good candidate here for Tennessee. But man, if you're a Vol fan, you're tired of being patient, but I believe you've got to extend a couple more years of patience towards Jeremy Pruitt.
I think it's got to be a couple at least. And I think the reason I look at it that way is, you know, when Nick Saban took over Alabama or Kirby Smart took over at Georgia, you almost knew what your identity already was. You know, you still had a blue-collar team. When Nick Saban took over to Alabama, John Parker Wilson was the quarterback. You know, we had good running backs at the time. Kirby Smart had some pieces in place with a couple of the running backs you saw when he – I'm not sure what Jeremy Pruitt's team is going to look like, specifically offensively. And you have Garantano, who obviously you think could be a pretty good quarterback for Tennessee, but you know Kelly's on his way to the NFL, Gauden's on his way to the NFL, Khalil McKenzie announces he's on his way to the NFL. I'm not sure what you have in the trenches on either side. I'm with you. I think this is 2 to 3 years really before Tennessee comes climbing back to the top of the SEC East.
Bo Molinari says it's less of an uphill battle for his team, Texas A&M, to turn it around. I think that's true.
Yeah.
I think there could be some first-year issues for Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M too, and maybe more of a year 2 thing for him or a year 3 thing for him. But I definitely agree that Jimbo and Texas A&M are in a position to sort of succeed much more quickly, if that's grammatically correct, than Dan Mullen at Florida, than Jeremy Pruitt at Tennessee, than either of the 2 Mississippi coaches. I think you're going to hear from Texas A&M in a big way within the next 24 months. It's like 36, 48 months for any of those other schools.
Yeah, I think. Well, I don't know if Florida. I still look at Florida as a team that has some playmakers. You look at the wide receiver position. You look at some of the playmakers they have offensively. I think given a better strength and conditioning program for Florida, all of a sudden you see some of those players that you were like, hey, why aren't these guys panning out? I think for Florida, those guys start to move in that direction as soon as next year. I don't know that Dan Mullen makes any noise next year, but I think they're a little bit further ahead than Tennessee is.
Bobby J. Smith in the comments section, going back to the idea of Georgia being a force to be reckoned with, he says, you don't think after another good year that UGA is going to start taking, people are going to come by and start taking its assistant coaches as well, and that may happen, but UGA is actually a little different, I think, than some of the other teams around the SEC in that I don't know how coordinator dependent Georgia is, and that's not in any way to disrespect Jim Chaney and Mel Tucker. I think they're both fine coaches. Georgia's more position coach dependent. Sam Pittman, the offensive line coach, one of the most important guys in this team. Del McGee, the running backs coach, one of the most important guys in this team. You know, those are the assistant coaches that Georgia can least afford to lose. I really don't know that Georgia's necessarily all that coordinator dependent because I don't know that there's any specific button that Tucker or Chaney pushed for Georgia this season. The coordinators for Georgia are more replaceable than the position coaches are.
Well, yeah, there's definitely that dynamic for sure. I think Sam Pittman in his own right is one of the best to ever do it as an offensive line coach, and you've seen that start to play out if you're a Georgia fan.
If Jim Chaney left, Sam Pittman would get to pick the next OC.
Listen, we had a very similar situation.
Yeah.
Joe Pendry was the offensive line coach. He had been in the NFL 40 years. He's the one that got to pick the offensive staff. So I am with you, a little bit when you look at that. But I can't look at the situation and think that there's not a small step back if you're missing a guy like Jim Chaney. And Georgia fans go up and down on Jim Chaney, in my opinion. Is he great? Is he not great? Is he good? Is he somewhere in the middle? But anytime you lose a coordinator, and especially a pro-style coordinator, and a guy like Jake Fromm who's been with Jim Chaney, I think there's bound to be a hiccup in there at some point. I think that I'm with you on the defensive side of the ball, but I think it looks a lot like, when Lane Kiffin leaves or Jim McElwain leaves or some of the other things. It's not like Bama misses a ton when those offensive coordinators have left. But it has left you in some situations that make you feel a little uncomfortable.
Joel Anthony Dean says the Georgia success was due to the juniors and seniors in the team, most of which are gone. It is true that Roquan Smith as a junior almost for sure leaving. A lot of seniors, Lorenzo Carter, Davin Bellamy, Nick Chubb, Sonny Michel, they're all out the door. But you just got to take my word for this. In terms of an overall talent level, Georgia's going to be more talented in 2018 than it was in 2017. Not going to have as much experienced senior-type guys, but last night, Alabama showed you that being a senior ain't worth nothing.
Unbelievable.
Because you got all these freshmen in there doing all the playing for Alabama.
Yeah, and listen, I've mentioned this a couple times in terms of Georgia's recruiting classes. It's where they're recruiting. I don't know what the future holds for Justin Fields, but when I look at the offensive linemen they were to bring in, when I look at the running backs they were able to bring in, it's very clear what Kirby Smart is aiming towards, for his offense for the next few years.
All right, let me move on. Item number 4 on our SEC Country Life First and 10 list, and I hope you're happy. I included this just for you. I've got no interest in seeing any of these videos. Alabama fans at some bars around Tuscaloosa having a really good time celebrating a national championship. Let's see the first one of these horror shows. So here is, I'm assuming this is the Devontae Smith touchdown. The folks there in the Tuscaloosa bar. The truth is, in most cases, I actually love these celebration videos. It just shows you how special sports can be. I hate this one, but I typically love these. Great celebration there in the Tuscaloosa bar for that. And then I guess after the game was over in another Tuscaloosa bar, first of all, look at this crowd. That's outdoors. Where is that?
That's at Rounders on the Strip, right there at the Strip in Tuscaloosa. And what they have up here, I don't know if you can tell, but there's a DJ where this camera is, and he is playing music down to the street below. Place is going absolutely bananas right now.
So how did you celebrate the national championship?
Well, I hung out with some buddies. Obviously, you can tell from the bags under my eyes that it was a pretty late night for me and some friends sitting around in the city of Atlanta. But it's crazy to say, but I didn't do anything crazy, I guess is the right way to put it. I had a few drinks with some friends. We hung around. We talked about certain things. Obviously, went out to a couple of bars and made our presence known. But at this point, I'm 30 years old. I guess I'm turning a corner. I like to talk about the game more than I do actually celebrating and raging and getting in people's face.
Boy, I'm telling you this. I was ready not to be 40 years old last night. Because listen, not to whine and complain here, but I didn't leave the stadium as it was until 2:30.
Right.
If Georgia had won that game and I'm leaving, because I usually get to work around 6 a.m. Had Georgia won that game, I wasn't even going home. I was going to I'd have been standing in the middle of downtown Atlanta doing that jumping stuff.
You'd have been like Frank the Tank.
I would have been like Frank the
Tank
streaky from the old school movie. I was looking forward to that so much because I'd gotten invited to come to some pre-game parties on Sunday night. And I was the good family man. I stayed at home and rested and played with my kids. And I said, I'm going to save mine for Monday night. If Georgia wins, I'm going to stay out all night long. And
I wouldn't have blamed you. And listen, I fully expected myself to be like that last night. But the game was late. There was bad weather and with everything that was. Listen, I celebrated. Don't get me wrong. I went out and celebrated last night. It just is not the celebrating that I did probably 10 years ago.
Absolutely. By the way, I hope you had a chance to join us yesterday for our special SEC Country Live with the folks over at $3 Cafe in Atlanta on Northside Drive near Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We were at a different time, and to be totally honest with you, I didn't do a good job of letting you know we're going to be at a different time yesterday. So if you were looking for the show and missed it, I totally apologize for that, but we're glad that you are with us here today on SEC Country Live. And in fact, let's move on and talk about item number 5 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. As some folks were mentioning a moment ago, Georgia does lose a lot of talent off of this year's team for 2018, but for a moment, let's appreciate the talent that was, including Nick Chubb, Sonny Michel, the 2 senior running backs. I had a chance to catch up with them last night during the post-game press conference, and what I laid out to Nick Chubb was, if you look at the sideline last night, you saw just about every great former Georgia player there was. Herschel Walker on hand, A.J. Green on hand, kind of on and on you could go with big-name Georgia players there in the building for that one. And I said to Nick Chubb, it's not inconceivable that one day you could be one of those former players back watching Georgia, and maybe it's in another national championship game. And if it does, you kind of got that ball rolling towards this kind of success. How would that make you feel? And Nick Chubb's a soft-spoken guy in most instances, certainly after a tough loss last night, but this is what he did say.
Yeah, it's a special place at Georgia, man. You see guys coming back that's playing in the league, come back to support us, and I know we feel the same way, man. It's amazing here at Georgia and a lot of support around this area.
kind of echoing that a bit is also Sony Michel as well, who, when kind of given the, the idea of, what if Georgia does build something better in the future? You don't win the national championship, but you're sort of a part of the group that gets that started. How would that make you feel? And I thought Michelle gave a pretty interesting answer. Here's Sony.
We try to set the standard high so our younger guys can know, where to take it from here. We fell short today, and I think guys that's coming back understand what it's going to take plus more to get back here.
So, I'm going to ask you as kind of not an outsider to the Georgia program, you know it very well, but as a guy that's not inside the Georgia program, how will you remember Nick Chubb and Sony Michel?
Listen, I will remember them the same way I remember my teammates who were in a similar boat. I ran into a few guys last week that were the 2008 Alabama captain, Rashad Johnson, John Parker Wilson, Antoine Caldwell. I run into a guy like Roman Harper, the guys that really were the stand-up players before all the rings started coming. And I think that's where you take your hat off to guys like Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, some of the other players that are in and around that program this year that are probably NFL bound. You're going to feel that way about those guys. They really, and I'm telling you right now, there's not a time. Obviously, I got one ring when I was in college, and some of the guys that came after me got 3 or 4. And it feels really good for them. But when I come back to the program still, there will be older people that have been around for 30 or 40 years, and they'll be like, you know what, you were a part of that group that got this thing turned around. That's exactly how I'll think of Nick Chubb and Sony Michel for the rest of time.
And here's the weird thing for me, and obviously I'm a fan here. And a lot of folks that are watching us right now don't like Georgia, but I'm wondering if they feel the same way about Chubb and Michel that I feel about some other star players in other programs. I like the idea of there being good players in the SEC, even if they're good players that my team has to play against, because it overall just raised the profile of the league. I like it when Florida's got top flight defensive backs like they've had, with Wilson and Tabor and some of those guys, or what Tennessee's had going on with Derek Barnett a couple years ago. You can kind of go on and on about the really good players in the league. We're sort of all made better when there are good players in the league. So while it's Georgia fans who are going to be the saddest about seeing Chubb and Michel move on to the NFL and try their hand at professional football, these are guys who've handled themselves well in the SEC, and to a certain extent, they are star players that the entire league has kind of benefited from, at least somewhat.
I completely agree with that. I can't tell you how much I used to enjoy watching a guy like Johnny Manziel play, or when LSU was really in their heyday, watching Leonard Fournette, going back to 2007, I used to love watching Jacob Hester take the field for LSU. When there are good players, obviously I took the same field a couple of times with Tim Tebow. When there are really good players, I agree with you. It's fun. It makes SEC football fun because you circle those games on the calendar. Oh, this is when Tim Tebow comes to town. Oh, this is when Cam Newton's going to show up at our place. That's how I'll remember guys like Nick Chubb and Sony Michel. You look at the two-headed rushing attacks you've seen in SEC in years past, those guys are right up there with any of them.
We're going to talk some Auburn here in just a moment. Let me hit a few comments before we do. I jotted some of these down. Bobby J. Smith, he's an Alabama fan. He mentioned that he could hear the disappointment in my voice today. Yeah. Listen, here's the thing. I'm not trying to be anything that I'm not. My way onto this show, my way into, this kind of subject matter is based on the fact that it matters to me. I do Dog Nation daily. I like the Georgia Bulldogs. I wanted them to win last night. And I think one of the things that hopefully you appreciate about Mike and me both is the fact that we're not trying to be pretenders here, and I'm not trying to pretend to care about something I don't actually care about, or I'm not pretending that something doesn't matter to me when it really does. I think to a certain extent we both kind of wear this stuff on our sleeves for better or for worse. And in the comment section, we've always encouraged y'all to do the same thing. This is a subject that's really important to a lot of us. We all have kind of a favorite team, and that's, I think, the vantage point from which we approach the show every day.
Yeah, I take pride in that. I like to think that you guys in the comment section, you guys that are watching with us, can follow along and live with the ups and downs of emotion, even if your team's not in a part of the game. You mentioned you can hear the disappointment in BA's voice. I think you can see the hangover bags underneath my eyes right now. Listen, live and die and breathe with everything that's going on with us, because I'm telling you, it's like you mentioned, we are going to wear our emotions on our sleeve.
Hal Love also mentioning, and I try to stay away from this kind of stuff because I don't think it's a factor in the game, and even if it is a significant factor, it's almost in bad taste to bring it up. But Hal Love, representative of a lot of Georgia fans who are upset with the offsides call on the block punt that could have been for Tyler Simmons, but had been good field position for Georgia. Had Georgia gotten the 15-yard penalty on what some Georgia fans would have said should have been a roughing the passer, or maybe I guess it'd be unnecessary roughness would be the more correct call on Jake Fromm. What do you say to Georgia fans who are a little irritated with the officiating?
Listen, the Bama fans lived it last year with the pick play, right there at the end of the game against Clemson. And the fact is that Bama's opponents have been the least penalized of any team in the country the last 2 years. When you start to add up those things. And so I understand it. Listen, I can't tell you how many games I watch. And after I was done playing football, I used to watch games and I'd watch them and be like, man, you guys chill out. The referees have a tough job. Last night, I'm like standing on a chair being like, are you kidding me? You know, living and dying with every call. It's just, these are like, you know, they're hairline calls. They're very tough calls for referees to make, and I understand the disappointment. You know, we go back and watch them, we slow-mo it 5 times, and you get the, you know, the instant replay and the analysis. But you know, you have to live with officiating sometimes in college football. I know it's a tough pill to swallow, but it's just how it is.
Let me get a couple Tua Tagovailoa related comments in here. Eric Shearer says, "Hey, what are Tua's Heisman chances in 2018?" I mean, it's not crazy that you can sort of talk about that. At least, I mean, it's one half of football. That's a pretty good half, and a game that's pretty important.
I think you're going to see an offensive line that gets shuffled a little bit. Watching Alex Leatherwood last night at left tackle, I think that maybe Jonah Williams goes back to right tackle. Maybe Jedrick Wills comes in at the right guard position. You're going to see an incredibly talented Bama offense line up next year. And if Tua's at the helm of that, you know, Nick Saban obviously has not stated whether or not he expects Tua to be the starter. I expect Tua to be the starter. And so if he's at the helm of that and he's throwing the way he was last night, I don't see any reason why he can't make a run at a Heisman Trophy, honestly.
John Shepard also says that we're being naive if we don't think that Tua was considering a transfer, that he's too good to have been a backup. I mean, clearly quarterbacks do transfer. I guess I would have assumed that he would have given it more than 1 year.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the Lane Kiffin sort of subject that started the show today. A lot of you are just joining us now. But at the top of the hour, we talked about what Lane Kiffin said, that he thought that Tua, or he knew that Tua was going to leave had he not played last night. I mean, is Lane Kiffin potentially telling the truth that maybe Tua was going to jet this winter if he didn't play in the 2017 season?
I don't see it. I don't see how any true freshman quarterback could say, you know what, if I don't play in this national title game, I'm getting out of here. A guy that hadn't played all year. I just don't see it that way. I think that Tua, and listen, you know, if Tua hadn't been the starter going into next season, maybe you get into fall camp and he's like, you know what, I'm going to be the backup again. I need to transfer. I can see that. But you can't tell me that it hinged on last night's football game and the national title game getting in at halftime. The fact is, though, he did get in the game at halftime, and they were able to pull it out, and it's you know, miraculous comeback from him. So it does change all the dynamics now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let me move on here. Item number 6 on our SEC Country Life First and 10. I told you we want to talk something about the Auburn Tigers, and some of these way too early top 25s are starting to pop up all over the internet. I love preseason predictions. I love getting excited about 2018 right now. That's just how much I love and care about college football. And the folks at the Auburn SEC Country page have kind of done a good job of sort of compiling a lot of the various rankings that Auburn is already sporting for this upcoming season. Let's see if we can kind of lay these out for you and sort of, you know, see how it all comes together. SEC Country, SI, Dallas Morning News, to the extent that that one matters, all have Auburn at 5. Bleacher Report's got Auburn at 7. Sporting News has Auburn at 8. 24/7's got them at 9, along with Athlon Sports and Yahoo. And then ESPN at 12. USA Today, the lowest rated for Auburn, they've got them at 13. So kind of everything in from like sort of 5 to 13 for Auburn next season. I mean, if I look at those rankings, what I see is a team that's expected to be a threat to Alabama for the 2018 season. I know it's. I'm not going to ask you to sort of cite the full 22 guys playing for Auburn. We're not quite ready to do that yet. Yeah. But just generally based on what you know, probably going to be Jarrett Stidham coming back.
Yeah.
Definitely the absence of those running backs. Some changeover with some other spots. I mean, do you generally speaking see Auburn as a threat to Alabama next year?
I think it's going to be tough. I think the fact that they have to play at Georgia and at Alabama makes it a very hard schedule for what has, you know, for what Gus Malzahn has going on. I think they're going to have to do some reshuffling along the offensive line. I hated some of their game plans this year and some of their losses. I absolutely hated what they did with Jarrett Stidham in the quarterback position. I think they have to find some kind of medium on their offense to be able to, you know, check downs, crossing routes, get the ball out of Jarrett Stidham's hand where he's not running around the backfield. If they can do some of those things, yes, I think that Auburn can catch fire. I think that Cam Martin can be a very good running back. I think they have enough good pieces along the offensive line to be able to piece something together. I look at and I don't know if you remember this. When we were going into the year, we had a topic on the show, the best duo of running backs in the SEC. And it was, you know, Bama's got Bo and Damian. And I voted for Cam Petway and Kerryon Johnson. I was like, you know what? These guys, when they're together on the football field, are incredibly electric. Well, you didn't get to see that this year, and now both of them are gone. So how are they going to recreate that magic next year without either one of them? I think it's going to be a little bit of an uphill task.
Militia Hill Robinson in the comments section says Auburn a threat to Alabama, and that's laughable. But the truth is, if you compare Auburn to the other teams in the SEC West, it's a new coach at Ole Miss. It's a new coach at Mississippi State. It's a new coach at Texas A&M. It's a really strange situation at LSU, which we'll have more on coming up in just a moment. I think Arkansas is just terrible. I think they were bad last year. I think they're getting worse in 2018. I think they're a mess right now. I mean, Auburn, because it does have its quarterback in place, and it's still going to be, for the most part, a pretty talented roster, and it's a program that sort of has a track record of running the football and replacing running backs. I think Auburn may be in a position to eat up some easy wins against the rest of the SEC West. I think you're right to say going to Alabama is a real challenge. Going to Georgia is probably a real challenge. You can't win both those games. You may be able to split them. But the rest of the schedule for Auburn, it doesn't include the defending national champion Clemson anymore. I think Auburn may actually be able to compile wins in a way that Florida, Tennessee, LSU, some of those other SEC teams are just not going to be able to do.
Yeah, I think it's there for the taking. I really do. I still have questions. And by the way, I'm as Alabama as it comes, but if you think it's laughable to think that Auburn might challenge a team that beat Alabama this year in Auburn, if you think that's laughable, I got news for you. That's not laughable at all. Auburn's going to be there. I mean, they're a good football team.
And I don't want to be a broken record on this, but for a long time I was saying that I didn't think Jalen Hurts was a championship level quarterback. If it's Hurts as the starter for Alabama compared to Jarrett Stidham as the starting quarterback for Auburn, even on the road, that's an advantage that still belongs to the Auburn Tigers. The change over to Tua Tagovailoa, all of a sudden that's not necessarily as true as
all of a sudden they look like they're going to have an explosive offense with a bunch of sophomores going into next year. And listen, I don't want it to get caught up. I really think Auburn's going to have a good team. And I mentioned to you a couple times this year, Gus Malzahn climbed in my book, but I'm still not there with him. Some of the things he does as a head coach, including not having his team ready to play away from Jordan-Hare Stadium this year, I just scratched my head, and that's not really the Bammer coming out of me. That's just me questioning really what Gus Malzahn's doing at times.
No, I understand. Let's move on to number 7 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Joe Essman in the comments section says, the special teams player for Brown for Alabama was a complete disappointment. A typical face of Alabama football. It's okay to act like a jackass, I guess, as long as you play for Saban. Not impressed. Alabama does not deserve any trophy. I don't know that you're going to forfeit the national championship because of behavior. That may be an extreme punishment.
Yeah, it's
but there were a couple of examples last night of sort of eye-opening behavior. Is it Mekhi Brown? Is that how you say it?
Mekhi Brown, yeah.
Yeah, Mekhi Brown. First of all, it starts on the field here with a pretty aggressive shot at a Georgia player. Let's see this on the field as captured by Pro Sports Extra. Here this is, a punch there towards Walter Grant, a Georgia freshman. And then on the sidelines, the flag does come in for that, by the way. But then on the sidelines, a mix-up with, the best I can tell, this is an Alabama coach here. Mekhi Brown bumps somebody out of the way, going after a coach, has to be completely restrained. Mike, I thought this guy's Alabama career was done. I thought he was going to be detained by security. They put him back in the game, and 2 plays later, he's clotheslining McCole Hardman. Who is this guy? Should he have gone back in the game?
I don't think so. And listen, I don't think it was a coach. I think the fact that this guy has a visitor's tag around his neck, I don't think you usually see coaches. I don't know who he was. I have no idea. Evidently, he said something that lit a fire under Mekhi Brown, and probably what he said was, you can't make mistakes like that in big games like this. That's what I would have told the kid right there on the field last night. But I'm with you. Listen, when he did that on the sideline, I was like, get this kid out of here. Like, I don't want to see any more of that right now. That's embarrassing for me as an Alabama alum to see somebody act like that on the sideline of a national title game. I don't want to see it. I was shocked that he came back in the game as well.
Yeah, we don't have the video to show you of this, but like McCole Hardman's running the football, he comes across like Nikita Koloff with the Russian sit-off.
I thought the tackle was pretty cool. I ain't gonna lie.
Clothesline. It's not. It's a legal clothesline, but this guy's in there just like. Yeah. And I was like, wait, that's 48. They put this guy back in the game.
Yeah, this would have been such a bigger story if this guy was like a starter on defense. A guy like Mack Wilson had done it. This would have been the headliner.
Totally. And listen. You want to talk about the real bold coaching decision that Saban made? It's not putting in Tua. Saban's known Tua is better than Hurts all season long. It's just a matter of, you're going to actually pull the trigger and do it. But there's no coach in the country other than Saban that have the guts to go get this guy off the end of the bench after he's over there because he's trying to fight everybody on the sideline and say, hey, get some Gatorade and get back on the field.
I can't wait to hear the story. I cannot wait to somebody on the inside of this program to contact me, and I'm going to ask, what did this guy say that lit that much of a fire? And I don't think he was a coach. When you're in these games, there are people that come on the sideline that you don't know, that are not around the program every day. They get invited there, and all of a sudden they put a pass on and they want to talk to you. Listen, that's not a good idea. This is the reaction you're going to get 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, I totally get that. While I didn't play football, I do see these guys right when they're walking off the field. And it does occur to me sometimes, boy, this would be the wrong time to ever say anything untoward because, you're just so raw and vulnerable in that moment, right? I mean, you are literally leaving it on the. I mean, leaving it on the field is not a cliche. I mean, it really is true. I mean, you are taking a part of you and leaving it in Atlanta.
Do you know who Byron Hout is? Do you remember that name? Byron Hout is the guy that tapped LeGarrette Blount on the shoulder after the Oregon-Boise State game and caught the hook right to the cheek. And I will forever remember that. I've never met Byron Hout, but I'm just telling you, I will forever remember that guy. I'm just like, the timing's bad. The emotions are at an all-time high. You're on national television going out in some of these games. Whatever the guy said, listen, I'm going to go on record. Mekhi Brown was way in the wrong. I mean, I don't know what the disciplinary actions are going to be, but they need to be up there. But whatever this guy said, not a good idea. Don't say it again.
So many comments coming in. I wish I could get all of these. Y'all have got some really good ones here today about everything kind of going on with that. Let me move on right now to item number 8 on our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. And that gets back to Kirby Smart here a little bit. Talking post-game about some of I think the interesting chess matches between he and Nick Saban's staff. First of all, I had a chance to ask Kirby directly, did you expect to see Tua Tagovailoa in this game? And Kirby Smart said, yeah, we did, and here's what else he had to say.
We had talked long about it and talked about how the ways we'd play him. He had played enough snaps. We'd seen him on tape. We told everybody at halftime there was no question that they were going to him because they were struggling and they needed some momentum. And he provided them some juice and got them some momentum, got the momentum swung back their way. And he's a good player. He's got confidence in his arm. He scrambles and makes plays, throws the ball downfield. A really talented freshman. I mean, he reminds you of Jake with a lot of the things he did. He's got poise in the pocket, and he made the plays when he had to.
Gary Westmore in the comment section says, I usually don't like prevent defense, but after the sack and overtime, I expected a timeout and some prevent defense. What Gary says there is an example of some of what I have heard from Georgia fans about how Tua was defended from Georgia last night. I mean, I told you this all last week. I did not think that Georgia was going to be able to defend against Alabama's freshman wide receivers. Now, I didn't know necessarily that Tua was going to be the guy throwing it to them, but that made it all the more difficult there. We just saw Georgia make an incredible halftime adjustment a week ago to defend against Baker Mayfield, the Heisman Trophy winner. Tua's only a freshman playing, limited football all season long. Should Georgia, especially if Kirby Smart should be taking his word they were expecting to see Tua, should they have had a better adjustment for him in the game last night?
Well, I think they probably did. And listen, we talked a ton about Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts and Alabama passing game. The one thing we did highlight was that Georgia's secondary, in a lot of different ways, has been that little bit of an Achilles heel for Georgia on defense this year. So I'm not ready to say that there weren't enough situational changes being made for Kirby Smart in the second half. I just think a lot of times he didn't feel comfortable putting some of his guys in the secondary, the defensive backs, in some of those other situations. I think that you can coach them up as well as you can, but the fact of the matter is that was a dime ball thrown from Tua in that situation. It was a great route run by Devontae Smith. And once Georgia has those 5-star players that they're going to start recruiting, obviously, and getting those guys in the secondary, then you can cover routes like that. I just don't think that Kirby Smart felt a ton of comfortability with what he was dealing with on the back end last night.
And then on the offensive side of the ball, Georgia comes out throwing a lot in the first quarter. As Chris Kaysen points out in the comment section, maybe not enough carries for Sony Michel in the game. Maybe some reason to sort of be a little critical of the Kirby Smart, Jim Chaney play calling. Here's what Kirby Smart had to say about that after last night.
Yeah, I don't know if they're first in the country on rush defense. I don't know. But they got big physical guys up front. It's hard to run the ball against Alabama. It's really tough. That's what makes them great. They've got depth in the front. Nick does a tremendous job recruiting defensive linemen, and they make it really hard to run the ball. So we wanted to be able to throw it, loosen them up. Thought Jake did a good job. And then in the end, we were able to run the ball some. When it mattered most and counted most, we couldn't close it out and run the ball for some first downs. It probably hurt us.
I think one thing that Kirby Smart says there is true. Georgia's sort of opening passing plays in the first quarter didn't actually yield much in the way of results, but I do think it made it easier for Georgia to run the ball later in the game, even if they weren't connecting on some of the passes that they were throwing. And I guess overall, I'm not that critical of Georgia's play calling here because Georgia, for better or for worse, was a slight underdog in the game. I'd encourage Georgia to sort of leave it on the field and treat it as a underdog situation. Take some chances, try some things. Georgia kind of did that. From that standpoint, would I've liked to have seen more Sony Michel? I probably would. He certainly seemed to have an effective set of skills last night. But overall, I can't point the finger of blame at Georgia's play calling for why Georgia lost.
Well, it's tough, and I think you saw them do a lot of the same things they've done all year that have gotten you to that position. I've mentioned a bunch on this show that football coaches are hard-headed. You do the same things that you've done all year. It's hard for those guys to flip a switch and say, okay, well now we have to leave it all on the field. We have to do whatever's necessary. I thought the play calling was fine. Obviously, I'm with you. I mentioned a lot, and I've mentioned this on your Dog Nation show. This Georgia team reminds me a ton of the 2008 Alabama team. 2009, you have a guy like Greg McElroy that comes out against Florida, and it's, all of a sudden you're in a spread offense, and Greg McElroy is throwing around, and it made it easier to run the ball. And I think you're right. Jake Fromm coming out and throwing the ball so much early opened up some of those running lanes for Georgia. They just didn't quite have some of those third down conversions right there in the fourth quarter to be able to put it away.
Rio Hanley says the Wild Dog got shut down. Have the one big play for McCole Harmon out of the Wild Dog, and it obviously worked for Georgia last week with the championship, or I should say in the Rose Bowl against Oklahoma. But that's another thing that some Georgia fans had a problem with is like crucial moments late in this fourth quarter. Georgia's going back to that again instead of something a little bit more conventional. And I understand where that comes from. And you can obviously pick apart individual plays, but we're mostly criticizing the fact they don't work as opposed to what they were, or whether it was run play, pass play. You just picked a play and it didn't work.
Yeah, I mean, I do find it funny too because being an offensive lineman, you do hear people whisper. They're like, "Oh, they call another run up the middle." Well, it's like when that run up the middle goes for 40 yards, you're like, man, what great play calling. When that run up the middle goes for like 2 yards, you're like, what are they doing? Why are they just jamming it right up in the middle again? It's a boomer bust style of offense, and I think they did a good job for the most part last night, just until the fourth quarter and some of those third down conversions.
Carol Vickers, I guess this must be the topic in the comment section about what the final touchdown was for Alabama. Was it a Hail Mary or not? I mean, my understanding was, the X's and O's obviously far better than I do, but this was 4 vertical routes, and Trey Dukes, as a Georgia fan, is all over me because I'm not paying enough attention to Malcolm Parrish, the guy who got beat on the play. But if you go back and watch the replay, Parrish's guy, Devontae Smith, wasn't the only wide receiver was open. So, I mean, Parrish, number 14 for Georgia, obviously did not have a good night last night, but he wasn't the only Georgia secondary guy that's had some trouble this season, and maybe not the only guy who had some trouble last night. So Hail Mary, probably not, but it was a vertical route, right?
Yeah, it definitely was. I think, and listen, I don't know if I've talked about this enough on today's show, but Tua having the poise to step back in the pocket and look off the safety off to the right and then throw the dart like he did to the left. Hail Marys, you're not looking anybody off. You're chucking this thing up and seeing who can come down with the ball. And obviously, we had that talk a lot early in the year for the Florida-Tennessee game. Was it a Hail Mary or not? This was just a dart. This was just a Devontae Smith route running right there in the middle, and you drop it on a dime and put it between 2 guys.
By the way, don't think I haven't noticed this, too. I haven't had a chance to comment on this. We haven't heard from Florida fans in months. We haven't heard from Florida fans since early October.
Scott Murphy's always in the comment section, but he's
Florida fans are having a very good time today. They are loving the idea that Georgia lost, which, listen, we're always glad to have you, whatever reason you kind of come in here, but it's been a minute since we've heard from some Florida fans, and they are certainly giving Georgia grief today.
Yeah, Scott Murphy's definitely in the and that's just how it goes. I mean, listen, when last year, I can't tell you right now. You know how people get on the SEC about acting like the conference as a whole and chanting SEC? I can't tell you how many ACC people I met last year after Bama lost to Clemson in the national title game. That Florida State, I mean, they're from all over the place, by God, but they're from the ACC. And they, it's the nature of the beast. Big games like that, your rivals don't want to see you succeed.
Peyton Mitchell says, "Hey, BA, go Gators." Listen, I'm glad to see y'all here. I was getting worried about some of y'all for a minute. All right, item number 9, SEC Country Live, 1st and 10. We talked about ways to really top 25s before, and it does not give me great pleasure to say this. It really doesn't. But I got some real concerns about LSU. I'm talking about for 2018, maybe beyond that. I think there's some tough stuff going on at LSU. And Alex Hickey, who we've had on the show before, he's a writer that covers LSU for SECCountry.com. Maybe he feels the same way. He was writing about where LSU might be in his own preseason top 25, way too early poll. He says at this point in time, there are too many unanswered questions about the Tigers' offense to be able to project LSU as a top 25 team next season. I hate to say this, that's Alex Hickey, SECCountry.com. Mike, I sort of agree with that. Yeah. And I love our LSU fans in our comment section. I love Cliff Nelson. I love Shannon Burgess. Kind of on and on we could go in terms of, folks who, Jake Higginbotham's a good LSU fan. I like our LSU folks. I'm worried about LSU next season, though. I think that LSU's got some real problems. I don't know who the quarterback is. I have no idea how Steve Ensminger, if he ends up being the OC, is going to be an upgrade over Matt Canada. I'm worried about LSU.
Yeah, listen, and obviously, as always, we'd love to hear you guys' opinion on the matter, too, in the comment section about whether or not you think LSU deserves to be a top 25 team right now. But I hate to say it, but I'm with him. We don't know what we're getting. We have no idea what the offensive side of the ball is going to look like for LSU next year. Is it Ensminger? Is it somebody else that comes in and tries to run a different style? Who's the quarterback going to be? What are you without Darius Geis? What is your offensive line going to look like? Do you have some of those guys jump to the NFL? We have not seen enough. And obviously you're going to have playmakers at a place like LSU at all times. But we have seen nothing that points to the fact that LSU's offense is pointing in an upward direction. I think they have to be careful. I think for a lot of times, after Nick Saban left LSU, you hired Les Miles. He continued the reign of success. And I do see a small dip in LSU right now, a small chink in the armor. And I think you have to be careful at LSU that this thing doesn't go any farther south. Ed Orgeron has to get the arrow pointed back north in a hurry.
Cliff Nelson apparently does like Ensminger as the OC, so we'll take Cliff's word on that for right now. And I think the defense is going to be pretty good. I think that Dave Aranda, keeping him, even if it's $2.5 million, was probably something you felt like you had to do. That's going to be a pretty talented unit. They also get some of those transfer guys eligible, like Braden Fehoko and folks like that. So they're going to be a pretty good defense. But how many of these SEC West games are you going to be able to win with defense alone? Maybe Ole Miss, maybe Mississippi State. I don't know if A&M's offense is up and running next year yet. The Florida offense is not going to be great. Probably that's the crossover opponent for LSU. You're going to be able to win some of these games with defense alone, but you're going to have some offense to beat somebody, though.
Yeah,
some of the better teams anyway.
And Shannon Burgess weighs in. He said, "Hell, I don't even know. I'm just really hoping for the best." I mean, I think that kind of encompasses. I think that kind of encompasses the way a lot of LSU fans do feel right now. It's like Ensminger, and Cliff's right. Ensminger, when he did take over after Les Miles was fired, he took over and they ran a pretty good style of offense. But listen, you're going to have a freshman quarterback probably next year, or a true sophomore, I guess, in Miles Brennan. You're going to have some questions along the offensive line. Some of those younger guys, I think they have a lot of talent in the offensive line group, just haven't played a ton of snaps. So What are you going to be? I'm just not sure.
New year, not a new us, though. We are still running a little bit late. But we got item number 10 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list to get to. And I thought it was kind of an interesting point by Zach Albalverde on the Florida podcast for SECCountry.com. We just saw a national championship game where Jake Fromm had great success for Georgia. He doesn't win the game, but his play this year got Georgia into the championship. Tua Tagovailoa, another true freshman, comes in for a guy who played last year as a true freshman, Jalen Hurts, and had terrific success. If you're a Florida fan, it's easy to look at those guys and say, hey, why not my guy? Why not Emory Jones? Here's what Zach Albalverde said on the Florida podcast about that.
That was my biggest takeaway from the game, certainly watching it and considering Florida and what to take away from the game and how it impacts the Gators and what they could pull from it. Seeing the way that the freshmen performed on the big stage, and not just for Alabama, but for Georgia as well.
So I think this is exactly how Florida fans should be thinking. I think that you need Emory Jones to be the starter next season. I think that in spring and summer he's going to get every push and every opportunity to do that. I think with all due respect, I don't believe that Jones coming out of high school is the same kind of prospect Tua Tagovailoa or Jake Fromm was. So I think that's maybe fair to point out here. Not a world of difference, but maybe a tick below those two guys. But if you're a Gators fan, putting a lot of faith and trust in your freshman quarterback, you've got a track record for how that has worked in the SEC.
I got to tell you, and we haven't obviously seen any of Emory Jones other than high school, but I'm kind of cautiously optimistic about what Emory Jones might be able to do in Dan Mullen's system. Now, we don't even know if Emory Jones is going to be the starter next year. We don't even know what really the situation holds.
Oh, but if he's not, it's a
but if he's not, exactly.
It's
a disaster right now, in my opinion. I agree with you that if he's not the starter next year. But I am cautiously optimistic. I'm one of those guys that, listen, if Emory Jones can come out and show me something early, I'm all on board with Emory Jones at that point. I just have to see a little hint in that direction. I think he's got the skill set that Dan Mullen is looking for. I think that Dan Mullen in that offense can kind of move pieces around to help Emory Jones get to the next level early.
Jeremy Pettis says, Big Mike, give us a big roll tide roll.
Roll tide, baby. Roll tide. Lord. It's rolling.
Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate that. Here we are. We're trying to finish this show on a high note. And
you don't have to twist my arm, Jeremy. I'm here for you. I'm here for you.
Yeah, so anyway, bottom line is I think Emory Jones, if you give me, this is such a made-up, contrived topic, but like the 5 players I'll be watching in spring around the league, Emory Jones on that 5 for me.
Oh, no doubt.
Of the entire SEC.
Without question. He is, if he's not in the top 3 for me, I mean, really, he's the one piece in a program I really feel like can get that team pointed in a completely different direction than it's pointed now.
Well, I'm really excited for the next few weeks. I'm going to shake the cobwebs off this Georgia loss and get really into some of this 2018 preseason hype talk. I love this kind of stuff. We're glad to do it with you here on SEC Country Live. Although when it's time to close at the show, we do it the same way every day. We're always looking for champions of life. And today, I can't quite tell if this one's real or not. It's certainly funny, but isn't a lot of this stuff kind of staged? So here's apparently a Georgia fan caught on camera in a whoops, that was not supposed to be recorded type moment, upset about the loss, and takes it out on the door in his, what it looks to be some sort of dorm room. Watch this video. Tell me if you think this is real or not. So he's mad, kicks the door, kicks it again. Now he's just punching his way through this thing.
I gotta be honest with you, I think that looks pretty real to me.
Well, he definitely kicks through it, but you don't think this is like a stage type deal here?
It could be. You know what? If you go back to the beginning, it does look like the door frame's a little loose right there. So maybe it is.
Like they sort of knew you could kick through this door. First of all, what is this thing made out of? Construction paper?
I don't know, but he's letting those left hooks and right hooks eat right there. I mean, he's going at the thing. He's ducking and dodging on that door.
Do you think that he broke a finger doing that? Broke a hand doing that?
I don't think so. He probably had a little bit of blood on his knuckles. I don't know if he broke a hand. I mean, I think we've all had bloody knuckles at one point or another, right?
He's probably got bloodshot eyes too. If you had to
He's
probably
not the
guess.
only one. I'm ready for these lights to go off, man.
So the 2017 season officially in the books. Congratulations. Should we? I know some of y'all are going to say we got the old Alabama helmet.
We've got to find the stickers.
Are we going
That's
to?
on me.
Are we going to get a? How much do these things cost? I wonder.
I have no idea.
Should we start a GoFundMe page to get the 17 to put on here or something like that?
I'll buy it.
So congratulations, Alabama wins the national championship. Georgia and Alabama will sit on our top shelf here for a while.
Get a close up on this, Michael. Can I get a camera?
We don't have the capabilities for close ups. We ain't that kind of show.
Roll Tide. 17.
All right, so congratulations there. 2018 conversation begins in earnest tomorrow. We'll have a good time with it. And by the way, if you're new to our show, we're not going anywhere. We do this 12 months out of the year, and we have a good time doing it. Whether you're a fan of our schools or not, we'll certainly kind of talk a little trash and have a good time. So we'll see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for another episode of SEC Country Live. Y'all have a good day.